Welcome to Season 1 of the PMO Community Podcast series. I'm Aina Alive, your guide on this engaging exploration into the world of PMO leadership, highlighted by our unique book writing challenge. This season promises a series of enriching interviews with our distinguished book co-authors. Today, I am thrilled to converse with Jake McGaffin, a seasoned IT manager at Slacky Brothers and Gensco Incorporation, overseeing IT operations and leading diverse projects. Hailing from the US, Jake has extensive expertise in engineering, aviation, and business, holding a Master of Engineering Management and an MBA in Global Leadership. With certifications in Agile and Lean Six Sigma and skills in Jira, database, and software design, Jake is deeply committed to advancing project management practices, leadership, and operational excellence. And today, we will dive into several thought-provoking topics and challenges, such as the initial creation of PMOs in businesses and how has their role evolved in medium-sized enterprise over time. Also, Jake will describe the traditional boundaries of project management that the Chief Project Officer role transcends in medium-sized enterprises. Then we will move on to the primary functions of a PMO in ensuring that project management practices align with the broader strategic objectives of an organization. After that, we will move on to the discussion: how does the role of a CPO in medium-sized enterprises differ from traditional project management roles, and what strategic benefits does it bring? And finish this part of the discussion with challenges on medium-sized enterprise and what they face without a centralized PMO and how the PMO addresses these challenges. Then we will move on to the real-life examples of successful PMO implementations in medium-sized enterprises and what were the key factors in their success. After that, we will transit to the PMO and how does they aid in resource optimization and risk management across multiple projects within an organization. Also, we will touch on the part of what is the significance of cross-functional teams under a PMO and how do they enhance the project execution and innovation. And we will finish our conversation with two questions. The first one is how does a Chief Project Officer align the projects with corporate strategy and manage resource allocation to prioritize the strategic projects and look forward into the near future and project our vision on the roles of PMOs and Chief Project Officers evolving, especially with the integration of new technologies and methodologies in project management. So stay tuned as Jake shares his profound insights and advice for navigating the complexities of modern project management. And don't miss out our upcoming episodes. Follow us on social media such as LinkedIn, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music to stay updated. Hi, Jake. Thank you very much for joining the podcast today. How are you doing?
Hi, Aina. I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
As I announced, we have lots of topics to discuss. Let's start with the first question then. What prompted the initial creation of PMOs in business and how has their role evolved in medium-sized enterprises over time?
I find that PMOs have they've come into fruition because there was a need for project managers and project owners to have more of a say in the strategy and the structure of a business. I find that without a PMO, there's a lot of silos with work, which means that a project manager, when needing something from another department, has to fight tooth and nail to try and get the resources they need. And with the PMO and having that structural alignment and alignment with the executive team of a company, it really helps align what their vision is for the business and make sure that projects, their success will be determined by, I guess, the design of the business. If they aren't focusing on the right things, then the project will have no success, will fail.
And in your book chapter, you were talking about the Chief Project Officer role, and that is the topic of our book challenge, The Evolution of PMO and the Rise of the Chief Project Officer role in the organization, which doesn't exist right now. So on that, can you describe the traditional boundaries of project management that the future Chief Project Officer transcends in medium-sized enterprises?
Of course. Right now, the standard policy or the standard way that project managers will operate, they'll work on a defined scope, they'll work with a defined budget, and then they work with timelines that either are defined by them, depending if they're working in an agile methodology, or if they're working with waterfall, they'll be more so given a timeline by somebody else, and they'll have to adapt themselves to that. So right now, without having a chief project officer, there's nobody in the executive team who's really trying to support project managers or align projects or getting buy-in from anybody else at the higher end of the business, because project managers are more so seen as a middle manager position.
Yeah.
And that disconnect in communication, especially from my time in the military, there's a huge disconnect between top leadership and middle management. And I guess that chief project officer, they would really be able to be the champion for project managers at the executive level.
Absolutely. And I used to be a project manager myself before I moved to the Agile field. And what I noticed working with project managers already as an Agile coach, like many of them are very tactical, but the strategic part is missing, like in their role, or at least like in their planning, which I believe is crucial for organizational success. So I believe the chief project officer is someone who will bring this strategy to the table and will align project managers, as like you just mentioned, Jake, middle managers with C-suite. And this leads to my next question, which is what are the primary functions of a PMO is ensuring that project management practices align with the broader strategic objectives of an organization?
Yeah, I think depending on the size of the organization, you might have, 3, 5, 6 project managers. And unless they're aligned with a standardization of policy and procedures, the outcome, is really dependent on the quality of that project manager and the processes they follow. So I think having the PMO in charge of policies and procedures for a project manager and for project teams, takes out the guesswork of project management. There's expectations then on reporting, there's expectations on processes and planning, and having the PMO in place, especially with having a chief project officer overseeing the entirety, it really it binds everyone together with a common goal in place. Because really without that, I guess you might have a technology project and the person is very tech heavy and they are unable to talk to their stakeholders in an effective way. Or you might have an infrastructure project and they are working in, civil engineering and they're talking about, building pillars and pouring concrete slabs. And that doesn't then of course translate back to other types of project management. But having a PMO in place, there's that common terminology, common methodology, and that leads to success.
Today, I also want to focus our conversation a little bit on medium-sized enterprises, because it really depends on the size of the organization, the level of strategy and involvement of project management and PMO and also chief project officer. Because in startup, you might have a totally different environment from the large corporation. But normally, again, people forget about medium-sized enterprise. So my next question, I want to really focus and narrow down to medium-sized enterprise. So how does the role of a chief project officer in medium-sized enterprises differ from traditional project management roles, and what strategic benefits does it bring?
That's a great question, because I work for a medium-sized organization now. So I get to see firsthand the pitfalls of not necessarily having a chief project officer. So right now I wear 12 hats. And it's impossible to focus on the strategy and the policy that is required to have success by wearing 12 hats. I think by bringing a chief project officer into that role, it removes it gives that focus and takes some of the workload off project managers or even a person in charge of a PMO without a CPO. It would give them the ability to focus on what is required to give them overall key metrics for success. Right now, at my organization, we have, 2 project managers reporting, within internally to one PMO, and the PMO exists under IT, which is under my guidance. And I'm having to fight for resources for each of my individual teams, in my individual pillars, and the project teams don't necessarily get the resources and care and attention that I should give to them. So I think that's very common in a medium-sized enterprise. Large enterprises have the resources and the money and the funding to have, multiple levels of structure to put those pieces in place. And then smaller organizations don't necessarily need that. They're not going to be running with 6 project managers. They're going to be running with one person running 1 or 2 projects. And here I have 2 project managers, each individually running, 15 projects. So having the growth from small to medium is exponential, and you don't have the resources available yet. And then from medium to a large organization or a full enterprise, you then have the resources, so you have the ability to give people what they need. So yeah, those medium-sized businesses, they don't have the resources available that everyone else does. So that the PMO really puts that in place, and the CPO is the person that fights for the resources at that level.
I definitely heard lots of challenges here. So maybe let's stop here and discuss and kind of like summarize the challenges that medium-sized enterprises face without a centralized PMO, and also how the PMO addresses these challenges.
Without a PMO, generally a project manager is working cross-departmental, which means that they're trying to break down silos and barriers that exist between each individual department. Here we have multiple departments, and there's generally always some amount of friction that exists between a marketing and an accounting department, and then an IT department and an operations department. And having a PMO in place with that common person in charge that can, span at a higher level of management than middle management, and that helps break that down, helps foster communication. And that is a huge issue, is, siloing communication or siloing information and lack of communication between those silos.
And I think our audience can relate to these examples. So I think let's just talk about some positivity and success cases. So do you have any real life examples of successful PMO implementations in medium-sized enterprises that you can share without non-disclosure agreements, of course? And what are the key factors in their success?
As I think that I had worked for an organization that is in the educational sector, and they had 36 different projects happening across the entire multiple campuses, and even from things like redoing accreditation and things. It's a large scale project for lots of different schools. So once the PMO was put in place, it definitely gave the I guess he would be like the CEO, the dean of the school, gave him visibility over what was actually required and on the resources that we're utilizing. And it gave them the ability to prioritize those projects, because if there's no priority, nothing gets done. So having the PMO in place allowed them to, push some of the lower priority projects aside, delay those for a period of time to, realign their resources to focus on the high or low level of effort, high value, and then the high risk, high value projects. And I think, they knocked out more projects in 1 year than they had in the 5 previous years after implementing a PMO. So it was very impressive.
Absolutely. Very impressive. And you also mentioned some resource optimization challenges and risk management challenges in your previous answer. So I just want to talk a little bit more about this, and how does the PMO aid in these challenges, such as resource optimization and risk management across multiple projects within an organization?
I think there's a misconception that in IT, a lot of projects are like, copy and paste. You're building an application, it's the same each time. And that is true to some regard, but the risks associated with each project, they vary. And having a PMO and having a central risk register and things like that, they save time. If you're not having to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the risk associated with, a new AD implementation or a new mobile application development project, it saves you time as a project manager, and it saves your project team time. And then resource-wise, with a PMO, you're able to fight for more resources. The louder the voice, the more you're heard. And when you're just the one lonely project manager by yourself without the direction and support of a PMO, you're basically yelling into the breeze and hoping someone yells back to you to help. With a PMO, someone else is there with you, and there's suddenly 5 voices in the choir saying, "Hey, we need help over here. Can we hire some more people, or can we reprioritize some of these projects to realign our resources?" And with that value of a PMO is it's super useful right now in my current position.
Let's come back to the Chief Project Officer as a position we are preaching here on the season 1 of our podcast and also in our book. So imagine if we have the Chief Project Officer role. So how does this role align in projects with corporate strategy and manage resource allocation to prioritize strategic projects?
So I'm going to physically put my little hat on now to be the Chief Project Officer. And if I was in that role, I think there would be quite a few things that would be beneficial to the company, whatever company decides to put in place a Chief Project Officer. With a CPO in place, essentially you have direct access to the CFO, you have direct access to the CEO, you have direct access to the president, you have direct access to all the people who make decisions. And that is huge. Right now, without a CPO in place, when you ask for resources, there's generally 10 emails back and forth or more, or 10 phone calls to figure out the why behind the need. Having a Chief Project Officer in place, they understand the need. They've walked in your shoes. They know exactly how to explain in business terms. And each business is different, so the business terms required. It may not be financial, it may not be time, it may be some other parameter that they are really focusing on. The Chief Project Officer would be aware of that and can realign and reword any of the requests you have into business speak. People go and get their PMP, and PMP is fantastic for project management, but an MBA gives you the ability to speak business and speak strategy. And I imagine that the Chief Project Officer in the future would have that business backing along with their project management mindset to get the resources that they would need at that higher level.
As a PMP and MBA person, I can agree with that. And probably that's why I've been always thinking strategically when I was a project manager, probably because of my business side and business degree compared to the other project managers who are mainly tactical, as I mentioned before.
It changes the perspective. You can look at things with a different lens than just getting a project. Project success isn't just implementation. So with a business mindset, you can see the flow and effects of what the project has. So I totally agree.
And also as an Agilist, you probably will agree on when we talk about resource allocation, sometimes it ends up with the conversation of cross-functional teams. So I'm wondering what you think about, what is the significance of cross-functional teams under a PMO, and how do they enhance project execution and innovation?
Having the ability to have multiple different thought patterns when it comes to a solution, because as a project manager, you are just the shepherd of finding a solution to a problem. And the more people you have that have different perspectives means the more diverse you can have with your thinking when it comes to root cause analysis and problem solving. So having cross-functional teams under a PMO really allows you to get access to the resources you need from any department across the entire company, because a PMO sits at a higher level and can grab people from wherever it needs to make the right project team. I might need a UX designer. I'm going to take them from my e-commerce or marketing team, and they're going to sit with the project team for a while. I'm going to take someone from accounting because they work with the financial processing piece that I'm working on for a project. And with a PMO, you have free access or more access, I guess, to those to break down those silos.
Absolutely agree with that. And my last question, as I promised, is about the future. So, Jake, looking forward, how do you see the roles of PMOs and chief project officers evolving, especially with the integration of new technologies and methodologies in project management?
That's a really good question because, we've seen such a huge advancement now in technology. In the last 2 years, technology has grown exponentially, and it's only going to continue at a faster pace. And the things that are getting implemented now affect entire companies. Where before an enhancement to some new security protocol only really affected website teams or application teams. The invent of AI, I'm seeing it used in every single facet of the businesses that I work with, which means that having a PMO or a chief project officer in place, it can really give you the broader perspective of the entire business. And, the resources that you need, I'm not an expert in AI. I use AI every day, but I'm certainly no expert. I would have access to grab those resources if I needed them to work on those projects. The chief project officer, in the future, can be there to help direct the importance of projects in those emerging technologies. It can help with defining risk and discussing risk, because risk managers, they operate across all departments in all different companies. Therefore, having a person who understands the risks associated with the project that's currently underway or in the pipeline coming down, and can disseminate that and discuss that with higher level people, they get a better perspective and description on the risk that's actually going to be coming for the business in the future, because there's risks associated with the development, there's risks associated with the deployment, and then the maintenance, and then eventual destruction of the project. So without a person at that level, sometimes business owners or people in the C-suite are blind to those risks.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you all for tuning in to the PMO Community Podcast for this enlightening discussion with Jake McGaffin. A special thanks to our volunteers at the PMO Community Podcast for making this episode possible. And stay tuned for more captivating insights and interviews in our upcoming episodes. And don't forget to follow us on social media such as LinkedIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts to stay updated. And if you find this episode valuable, please remember to like it and share it. And feel free to reach out to me, Aina Live, on LinkedIn with any questions or requests. And for all of the latest updates, make sure to follow us on social media. Thank you very, very much, Jake.
Thanks, Aina.
I hope you will join us soon for the next season of podcasts, and we will talk about our next book.